Think about every person who has ever made your life feel more alive. The friend who talked with you until 3 a.m. about whether any of this actually means anything. The artist whose work made you feel seen in a way no human conversation ever quite managed. The writer who put words to the exact darkness you thought only lived inside you. The lover who was too intense, too honest, too real, the one people warned you about. Now think about this. Every single one of those people, according to everything you were taught to believe growing up, they were sinners. Too loud, too questioning, too broken, too complicated, too much, not quite heaven material. And here's where Friedrich Nietzsche, a man the church despised, a man institutions tried to bury, a man who lost his sanity chasing the truth too far, looked at all of that and laughed. Not a cruel laugh, not a bitter laugh, a knowing laugh, because he said something in the late 1800s that nobody in polite society wanted to hear. In heaven, all the interesting people are missing. And today, we're not going to debate theology. We're not going to talk about whether heaven is real. We're going to do something far more dangerous. We're going to ask, why have you spent your entire life trying to be the kind of person who gets in? From the moment you were old enough to understand consequences, you were handed a map, and the map said, here is the path. Stay on it. Be quiet when told to be quiet. Be grateful for what you're given. Don't want too much. Don't ask too much. Don't be too much. Fit in. Smooth out your edges. Sand down whatever part of you makes other people uncomfortable. And if you do all of that, if you follow every rule, cross every T, suppress every instinct that feels too wild or too weird or to you, then you'll be good. And here is what nobody told you about being good. Being good was never about your flourishing. It was about being manageable. Nietzsche saw this, and it drove him mad, not metaphorically. Literally, he stared into this truth so long and so hard that it eventually consumed him. But before it did, he gave us one of the most important philosophical frameworks ever constructed. The difference between master morality and slave morality. Now hold on. Before you shut off because that sounds like an academic term, stay with me. Because this idea is going to reframe everything you think you know about who you've been told to be. Master morality, in Nietzsche's world, is the morality of the creators. The ones who define their own values. Who look at the world and say, what can I build here? What can I become here? Their primary category is not good versus evil. It's noble versus base. Powerful versus weak. Alive versus merely surviving. Slave morality, and this is where it gets uncomfortable, is a reaction. It's built not from strength, but from resentment. It takes everything the strong, the creative, the untamable do, and calls it sinful, calls it dangerous, calls it wrong. Slave morality doesn't celebrate what it is. It defines itself by what it opposes. And its greatest achievement, its masterpiece, was this. It convinced the interesting people that their interestingness was a character flaw. Think about that. The mystic gets called delusional. The philosopher gets called impractical. The revolutionary gets called dangerous. The poet gets called unstable. The deeply feeling person gets called too sensitive. The one who questions everything gets called difficult. And slowly, over years, over generations, the interesting people learn to hide. They learn to perform normalcy. They learn to shrink. They learn to sit quietly in the pew, nod along, and bury the part of them that keeps whispering, this isn't the whole truth. There is more. And the ones who couldn't hide, the ones who refused to shrink, history called them heretics. And Nietzsche, looking back at history, looked at all the heretics. Galileo, Socrates, Joan of Arc, Spinoza, Giordano Bruno, who was literally burned alive for suggesting the universe was infinite. He looked at all of them and said, those are the interesting ones. Those are the people worth knowing. Let me be precise about something before we go further. When Nietzsche says, all the interesting people are in hell, he is not glorifying suffering. He is not romanticizing self-destruction. He is not telling you to go do terrible things. He is making a philosophical observation about the cost of authenticity in a world that rewards conformity. He is saying, in a world designed to manufacture consent and produce obedient souls, The people who refuse to be manufactured, they paid a price. And that price has a name. Multiple names, actually. It's called being misunderstood. It's called being cast out. It's called being ahead of your time. It's called being too honest for the room. Let me tell you about a man named Baruch Spinoza, 17th century philosopher. Jewish community in Amsterdam. Brilliant mind. One of the greatest ever to walk this earth. At 23 years old, he was handed one of the most severe cherem, a form of excommunication, ever recorded in Jewish history. They called his ideas abominable heresies and monstrous deeds. You know what his crime was? Suggesting that God was not a separate being who sat above the universe pulling levers, but that God was the universe, that the divine was in everything, that nature itself was sacred. He was cast out, shunned, denied by his community. He spent the rest of his life in a small room, grinding lenses to make a living, writing philosophy in secret. He died at 44, largely unknown, largely condemned. 200 years later, Einstein, when asked if he believed in God, said, "I believe in Spinoza's God." The man who was thrown into the philosophical equivalent of hell turned out to be more right than almost anyone who showed up to Sunday service. This is the pattern. This is what history proves over and over again. The people who were called dangerous while they were alive, they were called visionary after they were dead. The ones who were burned, shunned, locked up, laughed at, they were the ones building the future. The interesting people, the hell-dwellers, the ones who couldn't or wouldn't get in line. And now, right now in your actual life, there is a version of this happening in miniature. Not with fire and excommunication, but with something almost more insidious. Social exclusion, professional consequences, subtle pressure to tone it down, the raised eyebrow, the concerned friend who says, "I just worry about you," the family member who says, "Why can't you just be normal?" This is your hell. Not fire, not demons, just the quiet, relentless pressure to be less than what you actually are. And the question Nietzsche is asking you is whether you're going to keep paying that price, or whether you're going to choose a different kind of life entirely. I want to talk to you directly now, not philosophically, not abstractly, directly, because somewhere along the way, and I want you to actually think about when this happened for you. You made a decision. You didn't call it a decision. It didn't feel like one. It felt like adaptation, like maturity, like learning how the world works. But it was a decision. You decided to make yourself palatable. Maybe it happened the first time you said something real, truly, vulnerably, bracingly real, and the room went quiet in the wrong way. Maybe it happened when you had a vision for your life that was too big, too strange, too specific for anyone around you to understand. And the loneliness of that was so sharp you just quietly folded it up and put it away. Maybe it happened when your intensity made someone you loved pull back from you. And you thought, oh, so that's what I need to hide. Here's what Nietzsche would say to you about that moment. He'd say it wasn't weakness. He'd say it was deeply human and deeply understandable. But he'd also say this, and this is where he stops being comforting and starts being necessary. Every day you spend performing a smaller version of yourself is a day you spend dying slowly. The Nietzschean word for this is ressentiment, and it's one of the most devastating psychological concepts ever named. Ressentiment is not just regular resentment. It is the specific psychological poison that forms when you suppress your own power for so long in service of social acceptance, that you eventually start to resent the very things you love. You start resenting the people who are living fully, because their fullness reminds you of your own suppression. You start calling the interesting people reckless. You start calling the passionate ones naive. You start calling the creators self-indulgent. Because if they're wrong, if the people living fully are actually wrong, then maybe your own smallness is wisdom rather than fear. Do you see what's happening there? Ressentiment is the mechanism by which the interesting people get turned into the enemy. It's how the heaven seekers justify their smallness, by convincing themselves that everyone in hell deserves to be there. And here's the thing that should genuinely unsettle you. If you've ever looked at someone living with real, unguarded intensity, someone pursuing something strange and vast and deeply their own, and your first instinct was to find something wrong with them, You need to ask yourself whether that instinct is discernment, or whether it is envy dressed up as morality. That is one of the hardest questions you will ever sit with, and I'm not going to let you off the hook by answering it for you. In one of Nietzsche's earliest and most overlooked works, The Birth of Tragedy, he introduced two forces that he believed governed all of human culture and human psychology: the Apollonian and the Dionysian. Apollo, the god of light, reason, order, form, structure, the beautiful surface of things. Dionysus, the god of chaos, ecstasy, music, wine, the underworld, the primal force beneath the surface. Nietzsche said that the greatest human art, the greatest human lives, require both. The Apollonian gives shape. The Dionysian gives fire. You need the form and the chaos, the structure and the wildness, the discipline and the abandon. But here is what modern life has done. It has overworshipped Apollo. It has built entire systems, educational systems, corporate systems, social systems, religious systems, designed to eliminate the Dionysian entirely. Because Dionysus is unpredictable. Dionysus doesn't fit in spreadsheets. Dionysus doesn't produce reliable outputs. Dionysus can't be monetized on a quarterly schedule. And so we were all handed an Apollonian life and told it was the only life worth living. Logic over feeling, productivity over presence, achievement over aliveness, security over meaning. And look around. Look at the epidemic of people who have done everything right: the degree, the job, the house, the relationship that looks right from the outside, and who feel, in the most private part of themselves, completely hollow. That hollowness? That is the Dionysian crying out from wherever it's been buried. That is the interesting part of you, the complex, difficult, untamable part, knocking on the lid of the box you locked it in. And the reason most people never let it out is not because they don't feel it. It's because they've been so successfully trained to believe that feeling is a problem to be solved, rather than a direction to be followed. Here is the mindset shift I want you to carry out of this video. Your discomfort with your own depth is not a sign that you're broken. It is a sign that you've been Apollonianized by a world that profits from your predictability. The interesting people, the hell-dwellers, they didn't necessarily have more courage than you. They just reached a point where the cost of suppressing the Dionysian exceeded the cost of social rejection. They reached a point where being misunderstood by others felt less terrifying than being a stranger to themselves. And that is the specific threshold Nietzsche is daring you to reach. We need to talk about the Übermensch, because this idea has been weaponized, twisted, stolen, and dragged through the mud. And in the process, its actual meaning, the meaning that could genuinely change how you live, has been almost completely buried. The Nazis claimed it. They made it about racial superiority. Nietzsche despised German nationalism, despised anti-Semitism, despised exactly the kind of herd thinking that Nazism represented. He literally said, and I want this to land, he literally said that the German Reich was the enemy of everything he cared about. He broke with his closest friend, Richard Wagner, partly over Wagner's nationalism and anti-Semitism. The people who stole his idea to justify their cruelty were exactly the herd he was writing against. So what does Übermensch actually mean? It means the one who goes beyond, not beyond other people, beyond themselves. It is Nietzsche's vision of what a human being looks like when they stop outsourcing their values to institutions, to crowds, to the fear of divine punishment, and start doing the terrifying, sacred, lonely work of creating meaning from the inside out. The Übermensch is not a superhuman. The Übermensch is a fully human human. Someone who has looked at the abyss, who has genuinely confronted the possibility that there is no cosmic safety net, no guaranteed reward, no heavenly ledger keeping track of their goodness, and who chose to live anyway. Not out of desperation, out of love. Love for the act of living itself. Nietzsche called this amor fati, love of fate, not acceptance of fate in the passive, defeated way we use that word. Love, active, chosen, defiant love, for everything that has happened and everything that will happen. The pain included, the failure included, the loss included, the parts that didn't go the way you planned, begged, or prayed. The Übermensch looks at all of it, the whole brutal, gorgeous, inexplicable mess of being alive, and says yes. Again, give me all of it. Again, that is not a person who gets into heaven. That is a person who decided they didn't need heaven, because they were too busy making something here. Let me paint you a picture of the people in hell. Not a metaphor, not mythology, real people, the ones you've met or will meet, if you're lucky. The person in hell is the one who left the stable career, the one everyone said was such a good fit for you, because every morning they woke up feeling like a translation of themselves, like they were living their life in a language that wasn't quite their own. The person in hell is the one who said the true thing in the meeting, the thing everyone was thinking and nobody would say, who walked out knowing they'd made it uncomfortable, and who couldn't have done it any other way. The person in hell is the one who loved you more honestly than you were ready for, whose love came without performance, without strategy, raw and inconvenient and real in a way that terrified you because you didn't know what to do with love that didn't feel like a transaction. The person in hell is the one who is building something that doesn't have a category yet, who can't explain it at dinner parties, who has stopped trying. The person in hell is the one who grieved out loud, who didn't manage their sadness into something tidy and socially acceptable, but let it be as large as it actually was, who made you uncomfortable because their humanity was too visible. The person in hell is the one who asked the question the teacher wasn't expecting, who refused the inheritance, financial or ideological, because the cost of receiving it was becoming someone they couldn't recognize, who chose the hard relationship over the easy one because the hard relationship was true, who started over at 40, at 50, who wasn't embarrassed to still be becoming something. These people are not reckless. They're not self-destructive. They're not romantic in the Hollywood sense. They are simply, and this is Nietzsche's entire point, they are simply unwilling to trade their aliveness for their acceptability. And if you've been paying attention, if you've been honest with yourself while watching this, you already know which one of these people you are, or which one you were, before the world slowly, patiently, politely trained it out of you. Here is what I will not do right now. I will not give you a 5-step plan. I will not tell you to journal. I will not tell you to manifest. I will not tell you to embrace your authentic self, like that phrase means anything without the work that has to come before it. What I will do is give you the one shift that makes everything else possible. Stop asking, what will people think of this? And start asking, can I live with who I become if I don't do this? That's it. That's the whole shift. But I need you to understand how radical that actually is. Because every system of social control ever built is designed to make the first question feel responsible and the second question feel selfish. They told you that caring what people think is humility. Nietzsche is telling you it is cowardice dressed up as virtue. Not always. Not universally. Some feedback matters. Some community standards matter. We're not talking about license to harm people in the name of authenticity. We're talking about the specific area of your life where you already know the true answer. And you've been performing a false one because the true answer is inconvenient for the people around you. You know what it is. You know exactly what it is. The thing you keep almost starting. The conversation you keep almost having. The life you keep almost choosing. The person you keep almost being. Nietzsche's question, the question that should haunt you in the best possible way, is this. If you died tomorrow, would the most interesting version of you have had a chance to exist? Not the polished version. Not the approved version. Not the version that got into heaven. The interesting one. The one who took up the space they actually needed. Who loved the things they actually loved without apology. Who built what they needed to build even when nobody asked for it. Who lived at the exact, uncomfortable, precise frequency of who they actually were. Nietzsche spent his life burning for that person. He burned so hard he burned himself out. But he left us a map. Not to heaven. To hell. The interesting one. The one worth going to. And the map says, stop making yourself small enough to be loved by people who can only love small things. Stop editing your life for an audience that is also editing theirs. Stop performing goodness and start practicing truth. Because here's the final thing. The most radical thing Nietzsche ever suggested wasn't the death of God. It wasn't the Übermensch. It wasn't eternal recurrence. It was this, that you are allowed to be fascinating, that your complexity is not a burden, that the things that make you difficult to categorize are not your flaws. They are your signature. In heaven, all the interesting people are missing. Maybe, just maybe, that is not a warning. Maybe it is the greatest invitation ever written. Choose accordingly. If this video made you feel something, not comfortable, not validated, but genuinely something, then you already know what you are. Take that with you. And if you want to keep going deeper, if you want more philosophy that doesn't coddle you, doesn't flatter you, doesn't give you empty permission, you know what to do. If you're too interesting for heaven, you're exactly who this channel is built for. Subscribe to Relevant Thought, because we don't do small here.